Okay, so is everyone connected? I think so. Okay, so I'll kick off the evening then. So you're all very welcome to week 5 of this 6-week course. Those of you who were here last week will see already that I'm feeling much better. I had COVID last week, and so I'm back fully recovered, thankfully. Unfortunately, Prasannadeva has now come down with something. It's not COVID, but it's quite debilitating. It's some other kind of bug going around, so he can't be here tonight, I'm afraid, so I'm covering for this evening. What we'll be doing tonight is, sorry, let me just check. Okay, what we'll be doing tonight is we'll follow the usual program. So in a moment, we'll do some meditation for about 15-20 minutes. I'll recap what we did on the previous week. We'll have breakout rooms then to discuss that. And then we'll have a tea break. And after the tea break, we'll have the usual presentation on another aspect of what's been going on. So we're looking this week. We've had a few weeks of introducing the whole theme, and we were looking at the reactive mind, the reactive mind that goes around the circle. And last week we started looking at how to step off the circle, and this week we're going to look at the spiral. So we're looking much more at the creative mind tonight and next week. Yeah, so we'll do that. I'll present some material after the tea break, and we'll do some reflection, and then we'll have more groups as well to bring it up to the end. Yeah. But before we do all that, let's now get set up for meditation. And we'll be sitting for about 15 to 20 minutes. As always, when you're sitting for meditation, make sure you're comfortable, make sure you're warm. Best not to lie down in case you fall asleep, if you can sit upright. And we'll be doing a period of mindfulness of breathing. But if you haven't done this before, that's fine. I'll be leading us through it. So just taking a moment or two to settle and arrive and make sure we're reasonably upright and comfortable and alert. So just settling into our posture now, seeing how we're feeling. Just taking in the sounds around us, the people that we're aware of, the room. Opening to our body, allowing in all the different sensations and feelings in the body. Drinking in what we can feel in the chest, in the heart, in the stomach, in the shoulders, in the arms. Allowing that flood of experience in and through our awareness. Opening up to what's there. The physical experience of being seated here on this chair, on these cushions. The contact of the body with the floor, the chair, the cushions, the furniture. And now allowing an awareness of the breath to emerge. The body breathing, the breath in the body. You can let this happen slowly over the next few moments. Just noticing how the body is already breathing. Noticing the movement of the rib cage, the belly as we breathe down into our lungs. We're not controlling the breath or forcing the breath. We're letting the breath be at its own pace. And with each out breath, we can just relax into the experience of being seated here. Letting go of all our worries and concerns and busyness from the day. Letting that all melt and dissolve away down into the floor below. And with each in-breath, we take in the energy of the air, a freshness, an enlivening breath. And with each out-breath, relaxing. And for the next few minutes, focusing on the breath by helping us to focus on the breath by adding a count after the out breath. So we breathe in and out and silently count 1. Breathe in, breathe out 2. Breathe in, breathe out 3. And the main focus is on the breath, not the count. And whenever we count 10, we start again back at 1 again. The count is there just to help us stay with the breath. So the breath, the count after the out breath. And if you wander off, that's okay. Just coming back again to the breath. And the count from 1 again after the out breath. And now we're just aware of the breath again at its own pace without controlling it. And in this next stage, we're simply aware of the breath with a count before the in-breath. So it's 1, breathe in, breathe out. 2, breathe in, breathe out. 3, breathe in, breathe out. And so on at your own pace. And on reaching 10, start again at 1. But the main focus is on the breath, and not about getting any number of counts done. And if you wander off, that's okay. Just coming back again to the breath, the body breathing, and start the count again from 1. And now in the next stage, we're simply aware of the breath, dropping the count, being aware of each in-breath, each out-breath, and even being aware of where the in-breath becomes the out-breath and the out-breath becomes the in-breath, the turning points of the breath. So simply with each breath, each experience of the breath in the body. Just noticing if we can stay with our actual experience of the breath, the Vedana, the feeling tone of it, if it's pleasant or painful to sit here, or if we go off into craving and aversion. Can we just stay with the actual experience, the contact with the body, the contact with the breath, and just see what the breath feels like without going round and around the wheel around it. And now letting go of the breath, letting go of all effort to do anything. And we'll just sit for a few moments, just sitting with our experience, just sitting with being here, not having to do anything, letting the mind do whatever it wants to do, but not joining in, so to speak, just letting it play out. Just sitting. And now starting to broaden out our awareness once more to take in the room around us, the sounds we can hear, the people. And in our own time, when we're ready, reintroducing movement, wiggling fingers and toes and so on. And coming out of the practice whenever you feel ready to do that. Okay. So just to, so that was most of the mindfulness of breathing practice. Most of you will know that practice. We did leave out a stage at the end just for time, but most people have done that. So that's one of our core practices. And also highlighting some of the material from last week. So just to remind you of what we did last week, I'll just share my screen. So we were looking at, actually, we were looking at the Buddha's teaching on conditionality. So this being that becomes, from the arising of this that arises, this not being that does not become, from the ceasing of this that ceases. So what he's saying there is everything arises in dependence upon conditions, our mental states, the universe, how we think of ourselves, and so on. And then we looked at how, look at the outer ring of the wheel of life. So we would start off with delusion, which leads to a certain type of body and mind arising together. And that meets the world then, and that creates our world. So we act out of delusion, and that creates a body and mind of, I don't know, ill will, for example, hatred, or something like that. And that meets a certain type of world and creates, that meets external stimuli that creates a world. And then we notice that world as pleasant or painful or neutral. And then we want more of it, or we want to get away from it. And then that leads us into grasping and attachment. And then we become a person shaped by that grasping and attachment. This is what we looked at last week, but looking at it even more simply than this, and that leads to further delusion again. But looking at it even more simply, we have feeling tone, which, everything that we meet in the world will, or in our minds, will be pleasant or painful or neutral. And generally, if we operate out of the reactive mind, we will end up in craving or aversion then. So when something is pleasant, we want more of it. When something is unpleasant, we want to push it away unthinkingly. Yeah. And then we get into grasping, which is kind of being more and more attached to a certain outcome, you could say, or having a certain thing. And then we end up becoming a person more defined by craving and grasping, which is a more unhappy person according to the Buddhist tradition. And the gap is here. So this is where the spiral begins that we're talking about tonight. So if we can stay with our experience without getting too much into craving and aversion, and act creatively instead, we can ascend the spiral. And then the home practice was to read the book. So again, you can reread up to page 25, but I was encouraging you to start reading the seminar extracts at the back of the book. So it might be good in the groups just to share if you did read that, and anything you found, how you found them, basically. If you've learned to meditate with us, meditate every day, try and stay in the gap, and notice the gap between feeling and craving, and bring yourself back to the gap if you overshoot. So that was the home practice last week. So Oscar, why don't we go into the groups now, groups of 4 or 5 for, let's go 14 minutes actually, because we have a bit more time. And we can have a plenary session then when we come back with any questions you have from the groups. So if you want to head into your group, if you're not sure, or your group is a bit different last week, we might, we might move you around a little bit just to make sure there's an even number in the groups. Okay, great. So I hope you had a good group there. So we have a bit of time now if anyone wants to ask any questions about the week, or any of the materials from the week. What we did last week, which I thought worked well, is that if any of the team members wanted to put up a comment or ask, I brought them on screen, and if you weren't on the team, I just let you talk off screen, so you wouldn't be, if you want, if you're happy with that, you can do so. We can also edit your name off the recording, if your voice rather, if you didn't want that on. But if you're happy, let me know, or you can type a chat question as well. So let's just take a few minutes to see if there's anything coming out of last week, because there was a good bit of content last week, it must be said, a good bit of material. And it's not something you're going to get straight away. I mean, I've been looking at this stuff for 20 years now, and I still have to really get my head around it, So throwing it out there to the floor. Carol, you look like you've unmuted.
Yes, I did. So we didn't have time to go into, because the time was up, but one of us was wondering, is like what would be classified as a creative response, because they mentioned that they were having a hard day and they decided to do yoga.
Yeah.
And after that, there was a relief and a sense of openness. Mm-hmm. If that would be considered a creative answer.
Totally, because often I think I notice when I am tired, the tendency will be to reach towards what will make you feel slightly better, like a cup of coffee, more rubbish, chips, lying on the bed watching some Netflix or something like that. So that's the habitual mind, you could say, the reactive mind. But the creative mind often needs to involve effort. It needs to get you. Basically, the wheel is a wheel. It just keeps going round because it's a well-trodden path. And the reason it's so hard to get off the wheel is that it's what's familiar, and we'll go with what's familiar every time. I mean, so much of working in the Dharma is about overcoming what's familiar to us and what's habitual to us. It really is. The Dharma life is, you could also say, it's the habitual life. It's working with habits. And so getting to a yoga getting to a yoga class or doing yoga instead is a creative one, which probably, I don't know, I can't speak for that person, but I could imagine them having to drag themselves there initially and then feeling much better afterwards, so that's a creative one. So I think one quality of the creative mind is that it's able to defer immediate pleasure for a greater sense of well-being. That's a creative response, which goes beyond the immediate I want pleasure now kind of principle of the reactive mind, Yeah, thanks, Carl. So yeah, for sure. Yep. Anyone else?
Can I just say, Vajrashura, like yoga, mention of yoga is like a moving meditation anyway. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's so linked in with meditation and everything. Most yoga is that it really helps to focus. Yeah. In a good way, your mind that. Yeah. You can create,
Yeah, well, so much of it as well. Like last week, I talked about the mind and body that meets the world, and I think people really underestimate just how affected they are by their bodies as well. And I think most people are probably in the modern world, they're probably underslept, overstimulated, and overfed probably as well, or at least badly fed with the wrong type of food, and I think we underestimate just how much of an effect that has on us. I mean, I have friends who for years, I just think they've never gotten enough sleep and they're just perpetually slightly out of it, even Buddhists actually, and I mean, that's easy for me to say, who doesn't have to feed, young children, babies in the middle of the night or anything like that. If you're in that situation, best of luck. But like I've a very young nephew at the moment, or nephew-in-law, you could say, nearly, and that mum is not getting any sleep at all in the middle of the night usually, but I think like so much of how we experience the world, the kind of mind we bring to the world, is very influenced by our body as well. And that's what the Buddha was talking about conditionality. We think that we can exist above and beyond conditions, but we don't, and it's easy to see this when things are good and we're on a meditation course or a Buddhism course. By definition, when you get on the wheel, you're almost unaware of being on the wheel, most of the time. You just fly into the next phase of craving or aversion so quickly that you don't notice it, If enlightenment was easy, we'd all be enlightened, Any other comments or questions? Be brave, feel free to ask and unmute. Yeah, Sam, I'll just add you to the spotlight.
Sure, thanks, Vajrashura. Just a brief comment. I'm glad you brought up the idea of denial of gratification. A couple of people in our group having come to the centre and the courses in a secular sense, at least initially, in terms of I recall that book and studied the marshmallow test, which I thought I'd hear more of in these kinds of courses of, the child can have a marshmallow now, or they can wait and then have two later on. And they're always videoed and you see them completely like losing their minds. But some of them are using their creative minds and they're like, either they're singing to themselves or, talking, psyching themselves up. Just thought it was a worthy reflection. I just want to ask about the term when you overshoot. To clarify that, is that when you jump too far into the craving, that you're kind of in the noise of it, or how would you describe that?
So I give an example maybe to illustrate that, Sam. So thanks for that. Maybe what I'd say is, one of my big samskaras, one of my big habits, basically, that's what that word means, over the years, is irritability with people, certain people, and I think we generally tend, the Buddhist tradition has a rough categorization that people often tend to be more irritable or more craving, you know, so a greed type and more irritability type or hate type. My tendency is more to be irritable, you know, and I've worked at that, and that's lessened a lot, by the way. But so when I meet someone that I don't like, or what I mean by overshooting is that you're already in a story about how they're irritating you, you know, rather than just being with, okay, here's this person who's with me now. I'm just going to say what it's actually like being with them. And actually, if you could really just be open to them, you're in that gap. You're staying in the gap out of which the spiral emerges, you know. And so overshooting in this case would be getting into a negative state of mind and not just staying with the actual experience of being with them. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of saying, it's like the chocolate already being in your mouth rather than just admiring it's like another example, say, is this is a very banal example, but I think it's quite a good one, is that you're eating a chocolate, but you're already thinking about the next one, you know? So the staying with the experience would just be to eat the chocolate and to really enjoy it. Moving into craving would be trying to make sure that, okay, I got to keep this pleasure going. What will I have next? And you're already scanning the box of chocolates, you know? And I noticed myself doing that in all kinds of situations. I remember being on holidays once and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go on holidays there next year? God, I'd so love to be on holidays there next year, while I was on holidays this year. You know what I mean? So much of us are future orientated like that, you know, craving something that we want. And actually, we need to come back and have the experience we're having just now. And actually, it'll be just much more enjoyable then. You'll enjoy it and taste the chocolate rather than being concerned with, you know, how to make the pleasure last. And be that real chocolate or be that any aspect of your life, you're trying to stay with the experience and savor the experience you're having right now and not get lost in craving for something else or aversion. Because if you're with that person again who you meet and you're already got into irritability, it's very hard then to see that person as a person. It's very hard to have a creative response then, and it's very hard to allow them to have a creative response to you in some ways, because you've already categorized them and you stop listening to them and stop seeing them, you know?
Definitely. Just briefly, in my own experience, I've often tried to apply dharmic teachings to my own autoimmune condition, which manifests on my skin with eczema. And it's very easily for me to fall into a victim mindset of just these conditions are above me. But there are times I'm able to overcome, and I just wonder how to, you know, what conditions can I set up whereas I don't, because I really fall into it's pleasurable if I scratch my skin, but it's also bad for me. So it's trying to square what is that, where's the Dharma door? I know that's another course, but also what conditions can I establish where that's less likely to happen, and how can I stay in the gap, which I find very difficult. So
yeah, and I'd imagine, Sam, like by the time you're there with the itch, the battle's already been won or lost in a way. Do you know what I mean? If you're in a certain state, you're just going to itch, I'd imagine. And if you're in a more spacious state, you might not. It's probably all about what you did in the hours before that as well, in terms of the kind of states of mind you're bringing to that situation too, you know? Yeah, so much of like meditating, for example, like getting a meditation practice going and meditating well is not so much about what happens on the cushion. It's about what you've been doing the last 24 hours off the cushion, or 23 and a half hours off the cushion. So you have to look at the conditions that go into, but that's what I mean by overshooting. Often it's just trying to work with having got it wrong, you know, and that's fine, you know.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any last comments before the tea break?
Can I just say, Anne here, that you were talking about overshooting. I found since I started to meditate that actually I have a sense of where things aren't right in my life. You know what I mean? It gives me a sense of, you know, and if I can't meditate well, it means that there's something else going on that I have to deal with or whatever, you know. It's a difficult one to explain, but you have to sort out the crap off the mat. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And was someone else going to speak there?
Sorry, I was.
Oh yeah, Maura.
Yeah. Did you say, is it samsara? You said you were saying about the irritability. Is that the Buddha word? What was the word you used?
Yeah, I used the word. I used the word samskara.
Samskara. Yeah.
Which is basically a deep-rooted habit.
And also, could you just say again? Let's come back a bit. What we're saying. We think we can exist above and beyond our
The
What was
conditions
that?
around us. Is it?
The conditions around us. So is that literally saying that, okay, it's depending on how I'm in the present moment as to how I'll be, you know, you were saying about
Yeah, it's
when
that.
you,
It is that, but it's also that we're part of the world around us. We're part of
yeah,
the flow of the world around us, and I think we cause ourselves suffering by seeing ourselves as separate to the flow of the world around us, and
yeah,
we live alienated lives where we don't feel part of life. You know, we feel like life is something slipping by us, or we're not fully alive. You know, a lot of people don't feel fully alive in the modern world, or part of the flow of life. And I think if we can, that's because we're kind of stepping back from it with an idea about it. And I think if we can
yeah,
just be, or we're too concerned or anxious about it, and if we can just be with the experience of having a cup of tea and looking out the window, we'll feel much more in tune with the flow. And that kind of, it's a deep state. It's not just an efficient state. That sometimes efficiency is talked about flow. It's more like feeling part of something bigger at work. You know,
yeah,
that's what, and you can only feel that when you slow down and you've not shot over the gap. You can stay with the primary experience and experience pleasure and pain and so on. You know, in everything you have, like the pleasure of the cup of tea, the sound of the birds, and so on. It's also called being present. You know, it's mindfulness.
And is it like the example you gave about meeting the person? So it's like you have already the judgment and the,
yeah, you're already
you've set yourself up for this.
Exactly.
You know, yeah,
You
yeah,
created a distance between you and the person, and you're not really working with the person anymore. You're working with your idea of the person, which is an irritant. You know.
yeah,
So what you have to do then is you have to pull yourself back over the gap again and just come back to what's actually happening here and what they're actually, and often, usually with things that we don't like, if you really do that well, you find actually this isn't too bad. Or even if it is bad, I feel resourced to be creative with it, you know?
that person that was not very nice yesterday is lovely today.
Yeah, and you know, who knows? They had a whole web of conditions that were that maybe you were irritating them yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks.
Good. Okay, well, let's take a break. So let's be back ready to go at 8:05 or so. That's just under 10 minutes. So, or 6 minutes past 8, then let's go 10 minutes to be correct. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat in the meantime. Or, yeah, great. Okay, so the next bit that I want to talk about is the wheel and the spiral. So I mentioned last week that, oh, I should say, by the way, sorry, first, that we for the rest of the lecture and the rest of this course, in a way, we're looking at the path to enlightenment now more fully, the creative mind. And there's loads of different representations of the path to enlightenment. And one of them that Sangharakshita mentions in the book is that of the image is the 7 factors of enlightenment. So he talks about that a bit in the lecture. And we're not going to go into that here because it's just too much material. So part of the home practice this week will be to read those 7 factors of enlightenment. They're very interesting. And those of you who did the Sailing the Worldly Winds course with me, we did go into it there on that course a bit as well in week 4, I think it is, if I'm remembering correctly. So then we're looking at different ways to enlightenment. So we've looked at the wheel where you go round and round and round. And the second thing then is, and this isn't in the image of the wheel of life. So on the wheel of life, we have the wheel mainly. You have the Buddha in the top corner pointing the finger to the moon. And in a way that's pointing at the spiral, although the spiral is invisible. You could say if the wheel is here, the spiral rises out of it and up and up and up, okay? So if the wheel is here, going round and round, the spiral comes out of it and it kind of goes round but up. And the characteristic of the spiral is that when you have a positive state of mind and you stay with it, it deepens into an even more positive state of mind. So that's the principle of it. So when you have a positive state of mind and you stay with it without getting into attachment or craving or whatever, it goes into an even deeper positive state of mind. So you might be able to see that, like, you can have a pleasant or positive, you can have a pleasant experience, you can have a positive state of mind, but you don't necessarily always stay in one. You know, sometimes we have a really positive connection with a friend. It's very deeply meaningful. We have a really good conversation. And then you get really upset when you have to go because you just like, you know, you just don't want them to go, you know what I mean? And you might get into even just being very clingy or something like that, you know? But with the spiral, the more you can just be and allow creativity to unfold, the more it'll deepen and further, yeah? So, and that's the contrast to the wheels. The wheel is where you bounce around. You just keep going around and around again. Out of delusion, we act in certain ways. We experience pleasant or painful things. We want more of them. We don't want more of them. And then you just kind of go around the wheel again and again. But the spiral is going upwards into ever increasing creativity. Yeah, Sam.
Sorry about it, sure. Just briefly on that point, what was your point in that with the example of the friend and wanting to, is it wanting to cling to the experience for it to go on, or what's the antidote to that? Just allowing?
Yeah, so yeah, that would just be one example where you're getting clingy. You know, I think you'd see it very strongly in a romantic relationship in particular. It might be very enjoyable being with the person, but then you're really upset at the thought of being parted with them. You might feel really creative while you're with them, but then at the thought of losing them or not having them there, you might get very upset, you know? So it's just saying that what I was saying there is that it's not a given that even though it's a positive state of mind, like really enjoying the company of a friend, that it would naturally lead to an even more positive state of mind. You know, you could fall back into a negative state of mind, I think, was what I was trying to say there, yeah? Yeah. And one example would be being clingy, or, you know, not wanting to go, or wanting and eventually getting annoyed with them because they can't give you lasting satisfaction. You know, you can only find happiness from within yourself, and so on.
And would noticing that in oneself be indicative of a certain state of mind, or would there be an antidote on how to get out of that, or just?
Well, I think you do both. You'd notice it, and well, not maybe that both isn't the right answer, but like you'd notice that, and you'd have to just see how it feels. You know, usually if you're in a story like that, like I need this person to stay here, there's a deeper underlying thing going on, and that's what you're trying to get at usually. You know, what is the story? What is the view that I have here about what I need in this situation? And there might be underneath it a view that if your friend goes away, they're never going to come back again, or something like that. You know, something like that. I remember having a friend who, she used to hug everyone when they left because she thought, they may never see them again. You know what I mean? Because they might die. And there's a certain wisdom in that, but there was a certain anxiety too there for her, you know? So yeah, so it's trying more to accept impermanence, for example. So you might be like, that was a really lovely time, and now I have to let it go. You know, that would be a creative mind response, because you can't hold on to anything. And the more you hold on to it, the more you destroy the pleasure of it. Yeah, you're looking ahead to the next chocolate to make it last. You're not wanting to let the friend go. But when you do that, that's the surest way to destroy friendship, or to damage a friendship, you know, and it won't be as enjoyable next time for you or for them. Okay, so that's a good question. So anyway, so the spiral tends to start. Let me just bring this up on the screen now so you can see it. So the spiral tends to start with dukkha. So I think we talk about this word dukkha. So I can't remember if it's this course or the previous course, but dukkha is a Buddhist word, and it means suffering, dissatisfaction, unhappiness, you could say. It literally means something apparently like a wheel out of kilter, you know, not something not being quite right. And there will always be dukkha in the world, you know what I mean? Even if we're really enjoying something, there can be the awareness that it's going to end at some point, you know, so there will always be dukkha. And this matches up to, you could say this matches up to old age and death and suffering on the wheel, if you remember that. That's the one at the very end. But you could also say that this is where, you know, remember I was saying that feeling tones can be pleasant or painful. Well, in a way, you can look at it as pleasant and you can look at it as painful, but really it comes out of that. When you have dukkha, you can go into the reactive mind, or you can go into the creative mind. And if you go into the reactive mind, you just move on to craving and aversion and around the wheel again. You know, when you experience, say, you're sitting there in meditation and your stomach feels ill, you can get into a big story about it, or you can open up to it and allow it to unfold. Yeah. So in a way, again, this is the point of where we have the feeling tone. So feeling tone is pleasant or painful, and painful matches up roughly to dukkha here. And you can be creative in response to that and go up the spiral, or you can be reactive and go around the wheel again. So maybe in the chat, we could have a few suggestions about what kind of responses to suffering leads to more suffering. What kind of responses to suffering leads to the reactive mind? Let's get a few typed in, just so it's not all me talking and I get you thinking about. Yeah, so this will last forever. So that's a story around that. Getting angry at the fact that you're angry. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? That clinging, yeah, complaining, yeah, victim narrative. So these are all really good ones. Yeah, yeah. Entitlement. Yeah, this shouldn't be happening to me, as if it should be happening to someone else, you know. Yeah, stuck in anxiety. So anxiety is a big response to unhappiness. You hate the reaction to hate. Yeah, you hate it is one of the things that, you know, you notice yourself getting irritated, and then you just dislike yourself even more, and then you get even more irritated for being an irritable person, you know. I don't know if anyone does that. Accusing, blaming, or other forms of externalization. Yeah, that's good, Albert. Yeah. Taking the positive out of the situations and leaving the negative stuff behind. Yeah, I don't deserve this experience. Good. So I think we all get the kind of negative responses we can have. Yeah. So can we think of some positive responses we can have to dukkha that might lead us onto the spiral instead, a creative response? So it will pass. Yep, yep. So Deirdre mentioned earlier that unhelpful response would be, it will last forever. This will last forever. And then Maura's one is, it will pass. Noticing the suffering rather than responding. That's a really good one. Cleaner, yeah, just staying with the feeling, as Dee says in the next one as well, actually. So just really what is actually going on here? And often, as I said earlier, it's not as bad as we think it is, yeah. Sam says sharing with others. Yeah, that's good, because you know, that's why spiritual friendship's really good. We can talk to other people. It can help us to remain creative. John is saying, what can I learn from this experience? Yeah, investigating the dukkha. So really feeling what it's like, the dukkha. And again, often it's not that bad. Thanks, Oscar. And Jamie saying, allowing your state to be. Yeah, allowing, Siobhan says as well. And Eileen says acceptance. So they're all similar vein. Tom again reflecting on impermanence. It will not always be like this. And Brendan and Derek was saying no complaints, no persistence of you overcoming persistent challenges. Yeah. How does this originate? Yeah, I will be stronger at getting through this. Not taking yourself too seriously. I think that's really good as well, Carol. I'm a big fan of not taking yourself too seriously, actually, in a certain kind of way. You know, we live in the age which glorifies and promotes me, you know, and I think we could actually be a lot happier by not taking ourselves so seriously, you know. I don't mean being unkind or anything like that, but we really should not take ourselves not take the stories of the self too seriously. I think a sense of humor is really important. Like, oh, here I go again. Look at me now, you know, that kind of thing. Okay, so my internet is unstable apparently. So let me know if I need to repeat anything, Oscar, if you can't hear me. So these are all really good responses to dukkha. These are all really good responses. So we're already there on the spiral, I think. And
I think he's gone.
so Shraddha is where...
Sure, we lost you there.
Oh, sorry. So I use these two Buddhist words because they don't quite translate exactly, and any translation won't be exactly right. So it translates roughly as, typically it translates as faith or confidence. A way of, I like to think of it as that you have a sense that there is something more Yeah, you have a sense that there is something more. There is something more than just the immediate experience you're having. There is something more than just the dukkha of being here with a human body. There is something more of meaning and value and use in the universe than you're seeing right now. And so when you can really sit with it, you have a sense, it might manifest as, okay, this isn't too bad actually. I can deal with this. That's where the confidence aspect comes out. Or maybe, okay, this is bad, but it will pass and something new will emerge, like Tom and others were saying there. Or maybe it's just like, okay, this feels bad, but there is a bigger perspective. I know there's a deeper meaning than just this thing here. You know, okay, maybe I'm having this painful experience with my friend right now, but I have a deeper confidence that our friendship will survive. You know, that people are fundamentally good, that it's worth staying with this. It's worth staying with this as a practice of the creative mind. Yeah. And so it's really important that we can learn to stay with unpleasant experience and painful things, and not get and just see that actually they often point to a deeper meaning. And ultimately, Shraddha is about a confidence in the fundamental nature of the universe, that there's something fundamental in the universe that tends to up the spiral, that tends towards enlightenment. And I do really believe this, that you know, there is something in human beings that responds deeply to enlightenment. You know, that's what I mean by Shraddha. You have this faith that there is something more. It's not a blind faith in the sense that you might have been brought up with in Christianity or something. It's more like you have a faith in the nature of the universe, the nature of humanity, that there is more. You have a faith in the nature of reality, that there's more than just the material, for example. Yeah. And it's this faith, this confidence is something that you can test out for yourself in your experience. And you can see that the more you practice, the more you see that there is really something in what the Buddha is saying. And specifically, it's faith in, for a Buddhist, it's faith that there is a path to enlightenment, there is a path to freedom. Yeah. So I take it, John, you're just agreeing there. If you have a question with your thumbs up, then your thumb is up there on Zoom. But yeah, so that's that. And if anyone needs to ask a question at any stage, just stop me. And this is crucial, this whole thing. I mean, in a way, this is the spiral. And then once we start to have a bit more of a sense of something bigger, that's another way of looking at Shraddha, a sense of something bigger, we will tend to experience more joy. So the spiral path is a path of ever increasing happiness and joy. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong in Buddhism with happiness and joy. Yeah, it's just about doing it in a way that doesn't mean that it's sticky or attached. Yeah, because we'll get back onto the wheel if we get too attached to things. But we really need to engage. We really need to commit. We really need to live life wholeheartedly and full-bloodedly. But we need to also be able to not take it too seriously too. So it's one of those juxtapositions. It's one of those contradictions in life. And the more we can really engage with the world and at the same time have this sense that there's something more, the more joy we'll feel in the world. That's the spiral path. And so onwards then up a spiral of ever increasingly positive states of mind. And I'll go through the full 12 in a moment, but that's the main aspect of the wheel, of the spiral, I'm sorry, of the spiral. So instead of doing the blame that happens on the wheel, we go into maybe forgiveness. And that brings, you know, dukkha, instead of the dukkha of the wheel, the dukkha here is of the wheel, you could say. And maybe instead of blame, we enter into forgiveness, and Shraddha arises out of that. Maybe instead of violence, we end up with tolerance. You know, we really tolerate someone. Maybe we have energy, receptivity, friendship. There's so many conditions that lead to being able to stay with a bigger perspective. I mean, it tends to be what goes out the door when we're under pressure and have no space in particular. But you can see that this really lovely path arises, and it leads all the way to enlightenment. Yeah. So just to mention briefly the 12 stages. So these are all in the book. You can read more about them, and some of them are a bit abstract, to be honest, to us in all likelihood. So the first one is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction. Then there's confidence or faith, as I've already said, and joy. Yes, they're the first three. And then after that, there's ever increasing positive states of mind. Now, these words are slightly technical. So rapture, I think increasingly in the modern world, has a particular association with religious rapture. Now, that's not really what's being talked about here. It's more talked about a state of very deep pleasure in just being in the body and being in the world. It's kind of deeper than joy, you could say. Anyways, it's hard. It's a technical term that is, the word is priti or piti. That's the Sanskrit words. And then we enter that deep. And so all of these are deepening. So confidence and faith deepens into joy. Joy deepens into rapture. Rapture deepens into a deep tranquility that we can experience. A really positive, vibrant, poised tranquility. And then out of that comes an even deeper happiness. Now, happiness isn't a great translation. The word often sometimes is bliss. So a deeper bliss that arises then. So even deeper than the deep tranquility is a deeper bliss again that springs from the mind, basically. And then out of that comes a deep concentration, a deep absorption, being really, really, really fully present to your experience. That's what's going on here. Yeah. A deep concentration. Concentration's too narrow a word, I think. Again, it's very hard to find words for these, but again, they're just a continual deepening. And when you can be really, really present, particularly in meditation here, you see this spiral unfolding most. What you can do then is you can turn your mind towards the nature of reality even more fully. And then what arises is knowledge and vision.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What is the Sanskrit word for concentration in this context?
It's samadhi. So you probably have heard that word before. Yeah, so it's samadhi. So very important word in the Buddhist tradition. So so the words joy is priti, tranquility is prashrabdi, sukha is the word for happiness, and samadhi is concentration. And then the next one is yata bhutana jnana darshana, which I'm not going to try and translate word for word. Oliver, you can look it up. And that is knowledge and vision of things as they really are. So this is where you actually start to see really deeply how things really are. You see deeply how all things are changing. You see deeply how all things are conditioned. You start to see what the Buddha's insight is in a really deep and meaningful way. And it's the point of no return. After this stage, you've seen things so deeply that you cannot help but flow towards enlightenment. In a lecture in the 60s, Sangharakshita talks about how you have this is when all the moon landings were happening. He talked about, imagine a rocket ship taking off from the earth. And you always have to make effort in the early stages of spiritual life. And you're always trying to work against what he called the gravitational pull of the reactive mind falling. But you'll always, once you stop making effort, the rocket will always fall back to earth. Yeah, until a certain point. And after a certain point, when it's gone so far to the moon, even if it turned off its rockets at that point, it would always fall towards the moon. Yeah. And the moon here is the creative mind, enlightenment, you could say. And the earth here is the reactive mind. So this stage 8, is the point at which you've made so much effort that it's irreversible. You'll always fall towards enlightenment rather than fall back to samsara, back to the world again, if that makes sense. And this is a very important traditional point. Now, this is quite an advanced point. I don't know many people who would claim to have got to this point, but I do think I have friends who have irreversible wisdom myself. And then these next stages are even more refined and maybe not worth talking about too much, but this one is called Nibbeda, which is disentanglement. So having seen deeply the true nature of things, one disentangles oneself from the world. It doesn't mean necessarily that you abandon the world, but it just means that you're not caught up in the play of the world anymore. It's like another image from Sangharakshita. It's like watching children play. The way children take games so seriously, and you can join in with them playing, but you always know it's a game. Yeah, and you don't have to take it too seriously. I mean, one shouldn't be getting upset by losing a game that you play with children, you know what I mean? And it's like that in the world. You see all these people running around trying to get money and trying to get status and trying to make themselves happy through worldly things. And you realize, I can do that if I want, but I realize deeply it's all a children's game and I'm not in any way emotionally invested in it. I can just remain in a much deeper state of creativity. And having grown up on a farm, the image that comes to me here is like you're in a briar patch, full of briars. Maybe you're picking blackberries or something, and you're just disentangling the thorny branches from your clothes so that you're able to walk freely out of it. So I love that image of disentanglement. And then dispassion, again, the word doesn't really lend itself, but it's more like you just are completely free from having to play the game of life. You know, you can just be utterly creative and utterly loving and utterly connecting with people without having to feel any pressure to play the games of life. And then you become enlightened. And for some reason, they always put in after you become enlightened that you know you're enlightened then. And I don't really understand why that is, but there you go. I'll tell you when I get there. If any of you are enlightened, you can tell me. So this is the creative path to enlightenment that the Buddha walked. And the really great thing about this is that it's a path where we can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And we might at times, you know, maybe at times we'll penetrate more deeply and then we'll fall back. But the more you operate on the basis of the path, the more it permeates your mind, and the more you become permeated with a creative mind, you could say, and the more creative you be consistently. And that's like one of the things I've really noticed. I've been practicing the Dharma now for 24 years or so. And I definitely feel that every year I'm becoming more creative. I'm becoming more free. I feel like my mind and my life and my heart and my world around me is more permeated with the flavor of the spiral, with the beauty of the spiral, with the creativity of the spiral, and less sullied, you could say, or less and less colored by the wheel. Yeah. Now I'm a long way from enlightenment, just to say that. But you know, I do really believe that the more we operate on the spiral, the better life gets, the more connected we feel. It's not a removal from the world, it's an engagement with the world, but in a really creative way. So yeah, so that's the spiral path that we walk up. And the last thing I'll say then, we'll see if we have any questions, is that Buddhism is a path of continual progression. You know, we're always going into deeper and deeper positive states of mind. And no matter how positive state of mind you can be in, you can always be in an even more positive state of mind. And I don't say that to make you anxious and to say, oh, I have to get even more positive here. That's not the way to do it. If you do it like that, you'll get back on the wheel. How you get into an even more positive state of mind is that you really enjoy the positive state of mind that you're in and allow it to naturally flower in its own time into something even more positive. And the mind will naturally do that if you just don't do greed, hatred, and delusion. Your mind will naturally deepen into an even more creative mind. Yeah. So the creative mind is deeply inherent to us. Yeah. So it's a very positive message, I think. And one of the best things we can do, and I haven't put this in the homework, but maybe we should do it, is just take time this week just to sit and do nothing and allow things to settle and allow something a bit more creative to emerge, a sense of something more. And it will if you're practicing, if you're meditating in particular, or if you really just want to experience a creative mind, it will emerge over time. And it will depend as well on you being a kind and caring and ethical person in the world as well. Yeah. If your conscience is heavy, it's very hard to move beyond dukkha, you know. You can though, if you really, in fact, sometimes when your conscience is heavy, it can really make you want to practice more fully, you know. Anyways, that's a whole other thing. Okay, that's all I want to say about that. Does anyone want to ask any questions? There's a lot there. I mean, I really do think that it really comes back to this, staying with unhappiness or whatever, dukkha, and allowing a sense of something more, and then joy emerging out of that. You know, having a sense that there is something much more to the mind than just this experience I'm having. We are much, much broader. In fact, we cause ourselves most of our suffering by over-identifying with our suffering. There's so much more to us than that. Anyways, these are the 12 stages of the spiral path. And these are all in the book. You can read a bit more about them there. And he goes into them more in the seminar. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see who that was.
Vajrashura, it's sort of indicative nearly of our approach in the Western culture, that many people believe happiness comes before joy. And here we find joy is 3 stages below happiness.
Yeah.
And then we get into in this Western culture, we get into 4 ideas about materialism to happiness.
Yeah.
And quite a lot of the time joy, which is kind of within the build kind of stages towards happiness, kind of gets neglected. Yeah. You know, I find anyway.
Yeah. I mean, everyone will have their own words here. I mean, there might be better translations, and for what some people call joy, other people call happiness. You know what I mean? So don't get too attached to any one particular layout here. They're all coming from Pali words and like Buddhist words, basically. But I think the thing is that we do, like, if we can just really open up and have confidence and faith in life, we will just experience more joy. And joy isn't, none of these things are anything you can force into being. Like, you can't force a flower to unfold. All you can do is set up the conditions and the flower will unfold. So what you need to do is set up the conditions in your life and these will unfold. Any other questions or thoughts?
So, you know, when you say set up the conditions,
yeah,
how do you set them up again?
Yeah, so you try and you meditate every day. If you know how to meditate, you stay in touch with friends who like this is the Sangha here, you know, the spiritual community. You know, read Dharma books. Just try and be kind in your interactions. Try and live out of as aware as you can. Try not to give in to mindless craving. Try and do things which feed and nourish your mind and your heart, like art and things like that, or you know, artistic appreciation. Try and get out into nature. You know, all these positive things. Do yoga, as someone said earlier. You know, whatever feeds your spacious, creative mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's like that song, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative.
Exactly.
Latch on to the affirmative.
Yeah, exactly. And don't mess with Mr. In Between. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, John. Yeah. In a way, I'm spelling out the vision for the spiral, and you've got to work this out then the rest of your life, really. Yeah. Okay, so let's do a little bit of reflection, and we're just going to reflect on this spiral and by contrast to the wheel, and then we'll go into groups for the last bit. So maybe setting ourselves up again to sit comfortably. If you want to, you can close your eyes or you can keep them open. Sometimes it's good to have a soft focus, open eyes for reflection. And maybe just reminding ourselves of something that's happened in the last couple of days or last week where there was something unpleasant happening to us, or we're in an unpleasant situation, where maybe we got into a reactive state of mind. We don't have to get into that state of mind again. And now just dwelling instead then with the positive, the creative mind. Imagine what it would be like now to respond creatively, either to that situation or to some other situation. Or maybe you can imagine yourself now just feeling spacious around it, or even just sitting here feeling spacious around it and creative, dwelling with that. If you're in touch with dukkha, you could imagine what Shraddha might feel like, what a sense of confidence of a bigger picture might feel like. What that would feel like in the body, in the heart, in the mind. Or if that's not clear, just dwelling with a sense of that there must be something more in the universe than just this difficulty. There's more meaning in the world to that. or if we're aware of suffering in the world, we can also be in touch with a bigger perspective, even if we're not quite sure what that perspective is. There must be a better way. There is a better way. And just sitting with any feelings of creativity, positivity, just seeing how they feel, if it's pleasant and spacious to sit here right now, or if you feel inspired, just staying at how that feels without grasping it or holding it tightly. Inspiration is another way of looking at Shraddha, faith, confidence. And if we're in a positive state of mind, if we feel creative, can we just stay with that without closing it down or trying to get something from it? Allowing it to unfold even more. And if there is pain, again, maybe staying with that until that deeper Shraddha perspective can open up, the deeper faith. So opening to the flavor of the spiral. And so I'll just talk us through the stages, and we can imagine them if we wish. So out of feeling of unhappiness or dukkha comes a sense of faith or confidence that there's something more. This isn't all of my experience. This isn't all of the universe. It will pass. There is a bigger perspective. And out of that comes tender joy, a joy that comes from having a deeper sense of meaning. Just feel lighter, more bubbly, more sparkly. And out of that joy, we feel deeply well in our bodies. Feel the pleasure of a mind and body opening up. And just imagining what that might feel like if you're not actually feeling that right now. And as we dwell in this, it deepens into tranquility, a deep peace where we don't need to move for anything. We could just be here ourselves. And this tranquility deepens into a deeper bliss of the mind as our deeper energies emerge. And as we're in touch with this, we can become deeply absorbed and focused on how things are, a deep samadhi. And as a result, we firmly see through our obsessiveness with the world. We have vision and knowledge of things. A limitation breaks. And while we can still engage with the world, it has much less power over us. We can disentangle ourselves from all the silly games that we used to play, that people play, and remain free and happy instead. And this continues to deepen. We become dispassionate about the world in the sense of not getting caught up emotionally with things, but just being able to be creative, ever more creative. And this continues until we gain enlightenment, liberation, not bound or held down by anything anymore, just purely creative. And we see that we are free. We've walked the spiral as far as we can see. And then bringing that practice to a close and opening your eyes again. And what we'll do now is, I'll just present the home practice. Sorry, let me just present the home practice first. Then we'll go into the groups. So the home practice this week is to read to page 42. That's on the Bojjhangas and all the stuff we covered. And I'd really suggest that you read more of the seminar extracts as well. Meditate every day if you know how to meditate. And then there's a quote in the book, a beautiful quote: "Love, the creative mind loves where there's no reason to love." You might remember that. So try and bring that principle into your life and see how you find it. And also the other thing I'll add then is, so this is part of the conditions, John, that we were talking about: loving where there's no reason to love, creating, being as creative as it can, and trying to give space for the creative mind to unfold on the spiral. So I'll add that too. So Oscar, if you could send us into the groups for 12 minutes, that would be great, and chat about anything there. I'll send these out as normal in the home practice tomorrow. Okay, guys, so I hope the groups went well. That's it for tonight. So next week, we'll have the last week of the course, and we'll be looking more at this question of what enlightenment is. So the big question of what enlightenment is, and the different ways of looking at what the Buddha experienced as the culmination of the spiral. So we'll see you next week for one more week, and I'll email you out the notes and the home practice and other resources as well. And don't forget, if you can donate to the Dublin Buddhist Centre, that would be much appreciated. So we'll leave it there. So feel free to unmute and say goodbye, and we'll see you otherwise next time.